Superheroes who have no superpowers can be just as complicated as their powered pals and peers. Often fans and more casual readers can get tripped up by certain characters who seem to have powers, or may briefly have had powered abilities but no longer do. Comics without context can sometimes be a little perplexing that way. So today we are counting down the top 10 superheroes without powers that we do not understand. We'll be taking a look at heroes who have no powers and their murky backstories, the misconceptions about their abilities, and how their history is confusing thanks to having multiple iterations or being victimized by baffling retcons. If you are a hardcore comics fan, most of the facts on this list will be familiar to you. So with that in mind, let's get to it. And at number 10, Hawkeye when he was Goliath. Let's begin our list with a character who doesn't have powers, but briefly did have powers, sort of, when he took up the mantle of Goliath. Marvel's resident expert archer decided in 1969 in Avengers issue 63 to succeed Hank Pym as Goliath, allowing him to manipulate his size and mass, while also giving him superhuman strength and durability. Here is the point of contention though with Clint Barton. While he's most known for being Hawkeye, dude has taken over a slew of personas over the years, like Goliath, Ronin, which we saw briefly adapted into Avengers Endgame when he was all broody and killing people after his family got dusted. And then there was also the Golden Archer for a while, as seen in Captain America issue 179 in 1974. So arguably yeah, he can get a little bit confusing. Moving on to number 9, Green Lantern, and all of the iterations. There are a lot of versions of Green Lantern kicking around. In 1940, the first Green Lantern debuted in the comics. Alan Scott. Scott first appeared in All-American Comics issue 16 in 1940, a railroad engineer who, after a crash, came into possession of a magical lantern. From it, he crafted a ring which granted him a bunch of powers, which he would then have to charge every 24 hours by touching it next to the lantern. Now for a long time, he couldn't affect objects made of wood with his powers, and for the most part he fought against mortal foes, minus Vandal Savage and Solomon Grundy. In the Silver Age, the Green Lantern alias was one that got revamped. Alan Scott had fallen into obscurity after 1951, but in 1959, editor Julius Schwartz introduced Hal Jordan, a more science fiction based hero. He had the same powers as Scott, but had a completely different origin and no lantern. He got his power ring from a dying alien named Abin Sur, who was an officer of the Green Lantern Corps, an interstellar law enforcement agency. In the Bronze Age, we were introduced to a handful of new Green Lanterns. Guy Gardner, who was meant to inherit Abin Sur's ring, but Hal was actually closer to the alien at his death. There was John Stewart, a product of the early 70s, who replaced Guy Gardner as the backup lantern. In the modern age, we got Kyle Rayner, who was one of the most notable lanterns after Hal Jordan, and the one you might know as the Green Lantern whose girlfriend was murdered, cut up, and then stuffed into a fridge, prompting the real-life Women in Refrigerators movement, spearheaded by comic writer Gail Simone. There's been a handful more too, including Jessica Cruz and Simon Baz. Considering they're a complete law enforcement agency, it should be no surprise that there will always be a Green Lantern coming out of the woodwork. There is one for each sector of the universe after all. In at 8, The Question. Don't let the question be a question to you. Sorry, I had to. There has been multiple iterations of the Question over the years, starting with the 1967 version, the original crafted by Steve Ditko in Blue Beetle issue 1. Having just created Mr. A, a character who was an expression of the objectivist philosophy, he decided to create a less radical version of the character who would be accepted by the Comics Code Authority. Thus, The Question was born. Initially published by Charlton Comics, later acquired by DC in 1983. The first version was Vic Sage, an outspoken investigative journalist who wore an artificial skin he had learned about from a scientist that was meant to be a skin-like bandage. It turned out to be fatal when applied to open wounds, yet one of its co-creators attempted to sell it to third world nations, and Sage used it as a disguise. After stopping that ploy, of course. In 2006, a new Question, a successor to Sage, would come in the form of Renee Montoya, an alcoholic ex-cop who was recruited by the Question and inherited his costume and mask after Sage had died. Thanks to the use of a substance called binary gas, which is expelled by a belt buckle worn by Montoya, her clothes and costume can change color, thanks to them being chemically treated. And at 7, Damian Wayne and all of the Robins. Damian Wayne doesn't mean to be confusing, but when you take up a mantle that has been preoccupied by several iterations of heroes since 1940, it's not surprising that some readers, or those unfamiliar with the history of said alias, might find themselves scratching their heads when it comes to the littlest Wayne. First there was Dick Grayson, who went on to run the Teen Titans and become Nightwing. Then there was Jason Todd, who was a Dick carbon copy, but then became edgy and was voted off the panels by DC readers and subsequently murdered by the Joker because of it. Tim Drake took over, but he went on to be the Red Robin, leaving room for little Damian to step up and become Daddy Dear's sidekick. Yes, we just skipped over Stephanie Brown, sorry guys. So, does Batman age? Well, nah, DC just continues to retcon the timeline so that he stays young and fresh. So it totally makes sense that his son Damian is, Robin, and he still looks like a healthy adult man who isn't aging whatsoever and can still totally fight crime. Yet Dick Grayson is a full-blown adult. Suspend your disbelief. Damian is the son of Bruce and Talia al Ghul, a product of their love affair from Son of the Demon that would be hidden from Batman for years. She faked a miscarriage, but then had the baby anyway. She raises and trains Damian, and then one day leaves him in Bruce's custody in 2006's Batman and Son, which riffed off that previous storyline. And at 6, Green Arrow and his personality change. For a long time, Green Arrow was perceived merely as a knockoff Bruce Wayne, a carbon copy that fancied himself as an archer. First appearing in More Fun Comics issue 73 in 1941, he was a blend between an Archer superhero concept mixed with a whole lot of Batman influences. He had a young child sidekick, a vehicle called the Arrow Car. Original. An arrow cave that he used as a headquarters, he was a wealthy playboy, and even had a clown-themed enemy. Despite all of this, he managed to live past the Golden Age, being used as a backup feature to Superboy comics. But he really didn't hit his prime until 1969, when he was revamped by Neil Adams and Dennis O'Neil, being given his iconic Van Dyke beard and a new costume. In the 70s, he would co-star alongside Hal Jordan, no longer having his wealth, but now existing as an advocate for radical change, a hot-tempered anarchist who cared about the little people. And yes, his young ward Speedy was a junkie for a brief period of time. It's important to know. Up next at 5, Rorschach and his mask. Rorschach, the crude and merciless vigilante from the Watchmen miniseries, is often mistaken for having some sort of power thanks to his mask. His mask, which he refers to as his face, is made of a specialized fabric that has 2 layers of material with viscous black and white fluids trapped between them. These fluids are in constant motion and are affected by heat and pressure, but never combined, making it look like a Rorschach pattern while on his face. While working for a dressmaker, Rorschach aka Walter Kovacs discovered the product when it was used to craft a dress. The dress was ultimately rejected, so he took home the material and used heated instruments to shape it into a fabric to cover his face so that he could look at it in the mirror. So it's not a power, just a neat trick. And at number 4, Batwoman, her origin versus what she became. There have been 2 iterations of Batwoman over the years, both practically polar opposites of one another, hence why she finds herself on this list. Batwoman first appeared in DC's panels in 1956 in Detective Comics issue 233. That version was Kathy Kane, a superheroine invented solely to make it seem like Batman wasn't gay. Not even joking about that. In the mid-50s, at the end of the golden age of comics, a Senate hearing on censorship in comics was held thanks to the influence of a whack psychiatrist named Frederick Wortham. Wortham had published a book called Seduction of the Innocent that claimed comics were negatively influencing the behavior of kids who read them, and called out multiple different heroes, including Batman, who Wortham claimed was gay with Robin. So DC reacted by creating the Bat family. Superman also got a similar treatment. Kathy Kane was a love interest whose utility belt was actually a utility purse and was filled with feminine-themed objects. Fun. Who needs a batarang when you've got lipstick? Luckily, she was purged in 1964 after Julia Schwartz became the editor of Batman-related comic books. Then in 2006 we got a brand new iteration of Batwoman, Kate Kane, a cousin of Bruce Wayne who was of Jewish descent and was a lesbian, described as the highest profile gay superhero to ever appear in a DC story. Under Greg Rucka, J.H. Williams III, and W. Hayden Blackman, she would have 2 fantastic runs, one in Detective Comics and a solo series in the New 52, the latter fizzling out when the creative team walked after execs at DC would not let them continue writing a story in which she married her partner. So yeah, overall big difference between the 2 Kanes. And at number 3, Bucky Barnes and his death and return. For a very long time there was an aphorism in comics that no one stays dead except Bucky, Jason Todd, and Uncle Ben. That is definitely not the case anymore, especially with Bucky. James Buchanan Bucky Barnes began his career in comics when he was a child as the boy companion of Captain America. At the end of World War II, the popularity of superheroes began to fade, leading to an era of comics based in sci-fi inspired narratives and concepts, and Bucky fell into obscurity for a bit. A retcon would later establish in the Avengers issue 4 in 1964 that both he and Cap had gone missing at the end of the war. He would make appearances in flashbacks for the most part, and his death would be used as an example for why Marvel refused to use teenage sidekicks in their comics, which was a pet peeve of Stan Lee's. Bucky initially died when trying to defuse a bomb on a plane, believing to have been killed in action, and the explosion it had caused had knocked Steve Rogers into the freezing waters of the North Atlantic. Then in 2005, it was revealed that Bucky had survived. He had been picked up by a Russian patrol submarine, his body preserved by the cold minus his left arm. He suffered from amnesia, was given a bionic arm, and he was programmed as a Soviet assassin, becoming the Winter Soldier. For years he was sent on covert missions as an efficient killer, kept in cryogenic stasis when not out committing homicide. Cap would come face to face with Bucky as the Winter Soldier in Captain America Volume 5 Issue 14, where Bucky's memories were restored by the Cosmic Cube. Up next, number 2, Booster Gold. What's his deal? Booster Gold is a strange but entertaining fellow. Some of you might not be aware that he has no powers. His abilities all derive from advanced technology from the future, where he's from. His tech gives him flight, allows him to shoot energy blasts, create force fields, enhances strength, and allows for time travel. First appearing in Booster Gold issue 1 in 1986, Michael John Carter was initially depicted as a glory-seeking showboat who came from the future, and used his knowledge of historical events and futuristic tech to make himself a hero and perform high-publicity stunts. Dude just wanted mad money. But eventually he broke through his poor reputation to become more of a true hero. He was introduced after the Crisis on Infinite Earths, a gifted athlete who lived in 25th century Gotham City whose father re-entered his life when he was in university in order to take advantage of his son's success, and use him as a means to cheat in gambling ventures. Michael would deliberately lose the games, but was eventually exposed and expelled for it. So what did he do? Well, he stole some devices from a museum, traveled to the past, and created a corporation based around him in order to get rich and famous. Booster Gold these days has been the victim of a whole lot of mental trauma, which started with him deciding that he would do something nice for Batman. He'd bring back his dead parents. As you can guess, that did not turn out too great, with the villains running this new timeline he created. He witnessed Green Lantern kill himself with his own ring, witnessed Selina Kyle kill Bruce's parents anyway, and then Bruce commits suicide. So yeah, not having the best of time right now, that is for sure. And finally, in at number 1, Huntress and her Earth 2 situation. Huntress is a character who often becomes a little baffling thanks to her continuity history. For starters, she first appeared as a character in 1947 in Sensation Comics issue 68. This Golden Age version was Paula Brooks, a supervillain who joined the Injustice Society of America. She would later be retconned as Tigress, a younger version of herself who used to be a hero and fought as a member of the Young All-Stars team. Then, in the Bronze Age, we got Helena Wayne, a huntress who was from Earth 2 and the daughter of Bruce Wayne and Selina Kyle. But during Crisis on Infinite Earths in 1985, she was killed, and her existence was entirely retconned after that event alongside others from Earth 2. She would later be re-established in the New 52, working with Earth 2's Power Girl, both of them retaining their Earth 2 past histories. But let's jump back for a sec. After Crisis on Infinite Earths, a new version of Huntress came to be, one with a similar costume and physical appearance, but a completely different backstory and name. This was Helena Bertinelli, a hero that Batman did not want to work with, seeing her as too unpredictable and violent. Others in the Bat family felt different, and eventually Batman would come around, sponsoring her for membership in the Justice League. But all in all, there's a lot of different Huntresses floating around in the DC universe in the past, so easy to get confused. Alright, there we have it, friends. What other superheroes that don't have powers do you find confusing? Yup. Give us a shout in those comments below and let us know your thoughts and all of your feels. If you guys dug this video, spread that love, hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe to Top 10 Nerd for more lists just like this one. We even have a nifty little playlist currently flashing on your screen that you should totally give a click. In the meantime, thanks for watching. I'll catch you all in the next one.